Okay, so let's unpack this. We're looking at a report suggesting a pretty big potential shift in, international trade alliances.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
And it zeroes in on former President Donald Trump's recent comments about India buying Russian oil.
Right. It feels like this is where global energy, international relationships, and maybe even a whole new foreign policy direction kind of collide.
Absolutely.
So, our mission today, for you listening, is to really get into the layers here, like the why behind what India is doing with energy, the specific what of Trump's proposed plan, and then the big so what. What does it all mean for global relations? But we want you to get past the headlines, straight to what really matters.
And what's really striking, I think, is how just one statement can pull back the curtain on so many complex geopolitical currents. You've got energy security, the ongoing fallout from the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
It really highlights this constant balancing act nations face, right? Trying to juggle their own interests with all these international pressures.
That tension definitely sets the scene. So maybe let's start there. Why did Russian oil become such a flashpoint? What's the background that got us here?
Well, it all really kicks off with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That was the catalyst.
Okay.
In response, you had Western nations, the U.S. and its allies, hitting Russia with some pretty severe sanctions. And a major, major target was Russia's oil money.
Because that funds their government, their military.
Exactly. That revenue is crucial for them. So the goal was pretty straightforward. Put an economic squeeze on Moscow, try to limit their ability to keep funding the war.
But that sounds like walking a tightrope, doesn't it? How do you even design something that hurts Russia financially but doesn't, completely destabilize the whole global energy market and send prices soaring for everyone?
Well, incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
Hugely difficult. So to try and manage that delicate balance, the G7 countries, the big wealthy nations, they came up with this price cap idea.
The price cap, right.
Yeah. And the idea was, well, twofold, really. First, keep Russian oil flowing onto the global market. That avoids the huge price spikes you mentioned, the big shocks. But second, limit how much money Russia actually makes from those sales. So it wasn't a full embargo like stop buying completely. It was more about cutting their profit margins. Let the oil move, but force Russia to sell it at a much lower price.
Sort of a nuanced economic weapon, then? Cut the funding, not necessarily the supply itself.
Precisely. That was the aim. Cut off the funding stream without cutting off the actual oil supply for the world.
Okay, so that brings us to India. Huge energy consumer right in the middle of all this. What's their thinking? What's driving India's strategy when it comes to oil, especially with these pressures?
India's approach here is, it's almost a textbook case of national interests driving policy, especially energy security.
They need a lot of oil.
A massive amount. They're the world's third largest oil consumer. You've got over 1 billion people, a fast-growing economy, making sure they have a stable and, crucially, an affordable energy supply. And it's not just like, economic goal. It's fundamental. It's about national stability development.
And the situation after the Ukraine invasion changed things.
Dramatically. The global oil market went kind of haywire, and India, well, they saw both a need and, frankly, an opportunity.
Okay, so beyond just needing the volume, what specific things did Russia do to make its oil so attractive to India? How did they basically create this new market despite the sanctions?
The main thing, price. Aggressive pricing. Once Western buyers started backing away, Russia began offering its crude oil at really steep discounts.
Not just a little bit cheaper.
No. We're talking substantial savings.
Yeah.
And that gave India access to significantly cheaper energy for its huge population, its growing industries. It's almost a pure economic calculation, rooted in that basic need to power the country.
And India's government has been pretty open about this.
Oh, yeah. Their external affairs minister, S. Jaishankar, he's been very clear, said it repeatedly, India buys Russian oil to keep energy affordable for Indian consumers. He frames it purely as economic well-being, not really about taking sides geopolitically.
And they've also been quite careful, haven't they, to say these purchases fit within international rules.
Absolutely. That's a key part of their defense. India has consistently said its purchases of Russian crude are happening below the G7 price cap level.
So they're saying, look, we're following the mechanism.
Exactly. The implication is, we believe we're operating within the bounds of these international mechanisms designed to penalize Russia, while also taking care of our own national energy needs. It's a complex balancing act.
trying to get the resources they need at a good price, keep the economy going, but also navigate this really tricky global situation without looking like they're totally undermining the sanctions effort.
That's the tightrope, yeah.
So how sustainable is that for India? Constantly trying to balance these huge energy needs against pressure from powerful partners like the US.
Well, it's a constant test, isn't it? For India, it looks like a pragmatic choice. It's driven by these immediate, very real economic needs. They see energy security as just non-negotiable.
Something they can't compromise on.
Right. And in their calculation, sometimes that outweighs the political optics or what other countries might prefer. It really shines a light on a challenge lots of big developing economies face. How do you operate when energy markets get so politicized? They seem to be prioritizing affordability for their people and economic stability above almost everything else, taking the opportunities that arise. But, whether that's sustainable long-term, that really depends on how global power dynamics keep shifting and, crucially, how other big players decide to react.
Which, of course, brings us right back to former President Trump's proposal. Very direct, very different reaction. What exactly has he said he'd do?
He's been incredibly explicit about it. No ambiguity. He's threatened that if he gets reelected, he would slap, quote, a big fat tariff on any country, including India, that keeps buying Russian oil.
A big fat tariff. Okay, so not exactly diplomatic language.
Not at all. It's a very clear, very impactful policy threat. And his reasoning, his perceived injustice, seems to come from this belief that other countries are, quote, getting rich, buying cheap Russian oil, while, as he sees it, the U.S. is carrying the main financial burden of supporting Ukraine.
So it's not just about the oil itself. It's tied into this deeper feeling about who's paying for the Ukraine conflict, an imbalance.
Precisely. That seems to be the core grievance. This perception that the U.S. is shouldering the cost-direct aid, economic fallout from leading the sanctions, while other nations are kind of benefiting economically from the same crisis by getting cheaper energy from Russia.
And this connects to his broader philosophy.
Oh, absolutely. It ties directly into his long-standing America First approach. That focus on domestic economic interests, political interests, often putting national benefit ahead of multilateral deals.
It's more transactional.
Very transactional. It views international relations through this lens of economic gain and, well, what he perceives as fairness to the U.S. taxpayer, rather than maybe traditional alliance, loyalty, or solidarity. If the U.S. is making sacrifices, he doesn't want others profiting from the situation, basically.
Wow. That sounds like it could really shake up the whole way countries deal with each other on trade and alliances, a move away from cooperation.
It would absolutely signal a major shift, much more unilateral, much more protectionist. A policy like that would undeniably put American economic interests first, potentially way ahead of traditional diplomatic ties. It could totally reshape how countries interact on huge issues like energy, like security.
It challenges the existing system.
Fundamentally.
Yeah.
Challenges these multilateral frameworks, tries to use U.S. economic muscle to force specific foreign policy outcomes, whether allies agree with the method or not.
Okay, let's try and connect the dots then. Thinking bigger picture. What are the potential ripple effects here? If this big fat tariff threat actually turns into policy, what kind of changes could we realistically see?
Well, the potential consequences are pretty huge, and they spread across a few different areas. First, think about U.S.-India relations.
Yeah, that relationship has been built up quite a bit.
Exactly. Carefully cultivated strategic partnership. A tariff like this could drastically change that. It's not just the immediate economic pain. It could seriously damage the geopolitical ties. Cooperation on defense, tech, regional stability, all that could be impacted. India might feel unfairly targeted, maybe rethink its alignment, look for other partners.
And what about the global energy markets themselves? They're already pretty jumpy. How would a tariff like this hit stability prices?
Significantly and probably unpredictably. If you force India again, the world's third biggest oil buyer, to suddenly find other sources, which would almost certainly be more expensive.
Well, that's going to push global oil prices up immediately.
Creates more chaos in supply chains, more disruption, higher energy costs for everyone. Plus, it can make other countries nervous, right?
Yeah.
Worried about similar tariffs. They might start reassessing their own energy plans, leading to a more fragmented, maybe less stable global energy market overall. Countries scrambling for secure, affordable supplies, maybe outside those established Western systems.
Okay, and what about the G7 price cap? That was meant to be the sort of subtle tool. Would Trump's tariff idea strengthen that effort or maybe undermine it?
That's a really critical question. You could argue Trump's tariff is almost a rejection of the G7 strategy, couldn't you?
How so?
Well, the G7 cap was, yeah, delicate maybe. Ingenious but delicate. It aimed to let Russian oil flow but without endorsing the revenue. It was about a coordinated multilateral approach using market forces, a big unilateral tariff. That just bypasses all that nuance.
It's much blunter.
Much blunter. It could undermine the G7's unity on sanctions, mess up their strategy, and it could potentially erode the whole idea of a united economic front against Russia. You risk pushing countries like India or others in a similar boat closer to Russia, maybe closer to China or other non-Western groups, if they feel like they're being unfairly pressured or forced into bad deals by the West.
So ultimately, this potential policy really forces the issue, doesn't it? This fundamental clash between a country's right to make its own energy choices and pressure from the outside.
It absolutely brings it to a head.
Yeah.
The policy directly challenges that idea of national sovereignty when it comes to energy. Every country, quite rightly, puts its own energy security, its economic stability first.
Naturally.
But this proposal suggests the U.S. could use its economic power to dictate those choices, regardless of a country's own needs back home. It just throws into sharp relief the different priorities, doesn't it? Energy security and development for India versus economic leverage and backing Ukraine for the U.S.
And those aren't easy to reconcile.
Not at all. And the choices made here, they could have really profound, long-lasting effects on how the world works, economically and politically. It forces everyone to take a hard look at where loyalties really lie when national interest is truly on the line.
So as you've heard, we've got India's very pragmatic, very real need for affordable energy bumping up against a potential U.S. policy designed to punish countries seen as indirectly helping Russia. It's way more than just a trade issue, isn't it? It feels like a preview of how this multipolar world really tests old alliances, forces every country to recalculate based on its own bottom line. It's definitely complex. No easy answers here.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And this whole discussion really makes you think about the true cost of global conflicts, right?
Yeah.
It's not just what happens on the battlefield. It's felt in this incredibly complex, often invisible web of international trade, finance, alliances.
Yeah.
And it also makes you wonder, in this world with multiple power centers emerging, how do nations really balance their own self-interest against global responsibilities? And what are the long-term consequences, maybe ones we don't even foresee yet, of choosing one over the other?
Definitely a lot to chew on there. We really encourage you to keep watching how these global energy dynamics and these relationships continue to evolve. Thanks for diving deep with us today.